My name.
We have two readings this morning. The first is by an activist out of Madison, Wisconsin, and it's a poem called "The Truth About Saving the World." What if I told you the revolution doesn't need your stress or your overworked exhaustion? What if I invited you to let go of that rage and resentment, to set yourself free first? What if I asked you to spare this movement your fear and panic at the expense of all those bitter jokes? If I told you this moment is fueled only by your every joy, would you believe me? Would you show up too with a boombox and shoes unlaced? Would you invite your little cousin to sing like church at the protest? Would you kiss in public and call yourself courageous? Would you hang out in your homie's garden plot braiding garlic? Would you make love more often and embrace your every ecstasy? Would you read quietly knowing you were changing the world with each moment of chill? Would you find yourself giving daffodils to strangers or topless in a swaying hammock? Would you whisper sweet words to yourself in the mirror and cook dinner with a dear friend? Would you suddenly have time to write poems or take a bike ride with your daughter? Would you plan a vacation to somewhere beautiful and savor your food for the sake of us all? Would you pay more attention to what makes you happy? Would you sleep in and drink wine while making art? Would the way you feel come into focus? Would loving people be the most important part? Will you come to replace complaining with writing thank you notes? Will noticing beauty become your religion? I want to tell you, the revolution will be joyful, that your happiness is a necessity, and your love will be remembered.
From Blossoms by Lee Young Lee. From blossoms come this brown bag of peaches we bought from the boy at the bend in the road where we turned toward signs painted peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowships in the bends, comes nectar at the roadside, succulent peaches we devour, dusty skin and all, comes with the familiar dust of summer, dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days, to hold the fruit of our hands, adore it, then bite into the round jubilance of peach. There are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background, from joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to blossom, to impossible blossom, to impossible blossom.
It wasn't very long ago that I found myself saying to the board and to other leadership of the congregation that I just wanted joy, that I wanted to have the season that we are in together in this congregation just be joy, joy, joy. And that probably isn't surprising. I was realizing that it is essentially 3 years since the Safe Congregation Response Team got on an emergency call and shut down the USR office and moved all business and all services online. I can honestly, in part, barely register the truth of that it's been 3 years. I don't know if anyone else struggles with that time. 3 years since everything about how we lived shifted drastically in a really short span. And in those 3 years, there has been incalculable loss. There's been change after change, pivoting on a dime, adjusting in ways we didn't even realize we were capable of. Relationships, work, child rearing, school, none of these look as they did 3 years ago. People have uprooted their lives in response to the tragedies and the challenges, moving across country to be closer to loved ones, moving out of cities to be closer to nature, quitting jobs that felt unsatisfying or that were taking advantage of them, reprioritizing everything in their lives. These past 3 years have changed all of us in ways I think we still don't fully understand. Recently, one of you sent me a link to a brief piece in the New York Times. It was a piece about the most recent book by Katherine May. May is a best-selling author and podcaster from the United Kingdom. She has autism spectrum disorder that was diagnosed late in life, and she's written essays and books about motherhood, about living, and her podcast, in fact, is titled How We Live Now. So that New York Times piece sent me off to read May's newest work, which is titled Enchantment. There's a colon subtitle, but if you search Enchantment, you'll find it. In it, I found descriptions of the kind of struggle for joy that I have heard from others over these past years, and that at times I have felt myself. So this is one of those days when I'm going to give you some long quotes from this book, which just means go ahead and go home and read it, okay? So this is the quote from May. She writes, "Maybe I have stalled. Perhaps I'm depressed, but it doesn't feel like other depressions I have encountered. I feel none of the self-loathing that once buckled my knees, none of the urge towards destruction. I am still very much afloat, and in fact, strangely content. I'm just slow, that's all. I'm just empty. I theorize that it's a kind of pandemic hangover. My wits dulled from too little stimulation, my sensitivities heightened by the lack of demand. I liked the social truce that lockdown brought, but I was also restless and bored. Now I seem to be stuck there, bored, restless, empty-headed, and bodily resistant to changing it. Stillness had settled into my muscles, and I don't know how to feel fluid again. I am far from alone. The people I know are talking about this too, in their own different ways. They blame the rigors of parenting through a pandemic while still trying to work. They talk about loneliness and isolation, the way it leads them to obsess over things beyond their control. They talk increasingly about menopause and the way it fogs their minds. Some are even naming it burnout. So while for each of us, the experience of the pandemic was different, too much together time, too much isolation, not enough work, too much work, May is pointing out in this book that the pandemic came when we were already primed by years of endless news cycles and the life-altering changes of social media to be fearful and anxious and overwhelmed. And that the result is a kind of PTSD, perhaps. I actually know folks who've been diagnosed with PTSD after the pandemic, right? Because of the pandemic itself. The result is a kind of stalling, what she calls a hangover. And her description, right, of being bored, restless, empty-headed, and bodily resistant to changing it. I wonder if any of that resonates with any of you. I want to give us a chance to share. Now, remember, if you don't want to share, you do not have to. You can gently let the person near you know that you'd rather sit in quiet reflection with this question. But if you're open to speaking to your neighbor, I'm going to ask you to turn to someone near you and just talk with each other for a minute or two about whether or not that description May gives resonates with how you feel now in the wake of the pandemic. If you find yourself holding on to sorrow or stillness or boredom or inertia of the deep pandemic time. So you can go ahead, take just a minute or two and check in if you want, never mandatory, with the person near you. It is a really important exercise to share the stories, also the hard stories, right? It's important to say what we feel and to name what is keeping us stuck or frozen. We have to be able to honor the hard things together. And we have to take to heart what Ali Muldrow says in that poem that we heard earlier, and I'm going to repeat it for you because I think it is so powerful. I want to tell you the revolution will be joyful, that your happiness is a necessity and your love will be remembered. And like, what a gift those 4 lines are, to reclaim joy as the center of the work for change, to privilege happiness in these short lives that we live, to recognize that what will last is the love that we give and receive. Earlier this week, as some of you may have realized, was the Hindu Festival of Holi. It's a joyful festival embracing spring after a long winter and celebrating the triumph of good. As with many holidays, there are lots of origin stories. The one that I learned long ago is the story of Hiranyakashipu and his son Prahlad. Hiranyakashipu is a king, and he demands that everybody worship him and only him. But his son is a devotee of Vishnu and refuses to worship his father, choosing instead to worship the god of Vishnu. The king tries to get his sister, Holika, to drag Prahlad into a fire to kill him. She'll be safe because she has a fire-resistant cloak. But because of the evil that she and her brother are plotting, the fire-resistant cloak like flies off of her and onto Prahlad and saves him, and then she burns, okay? So it's good winning out over evil. The holiday is celebrated with bonfires and singing and dancing and with the throwing of colored paint. You've probably seen pictures, and feasting. It's beautiful, it's joyful, it's playful. It's a reminder that there can be joy in the fight, joy in the changing seasons, joy in the way that we can be with one another, even in the wake of evil and tragedy. And also, I know that that isn't actually easy. Many of us don't have holidays built into our year to celebrate joy. Many of us have forgotten over these past years the things that used to bring us joy. Or perhaps we haven't forgotten, but maybe the old ways that we had of connecting to joy aren't working anymore. Maybe you used to love to read books, but have found it hard to sit down and focus on a book these past years. Maybe you used to walk each day, but the time of isolation ended that habit and you're struggling to get it back. Maybe you aren't even sure you remember what you've lost. While Katherine May doesn't use the term joy overwhelmingly in her work, she describes the need, a deep need, to get back in touch with herself, with her center, with the world, and she calls it enchantment, and she wants to recover it. And this is how she describes it. She says, enchantment is small wonder magnified through meaning. Fascination caught in the web of fable and memory, it relies on small doses of awe, almost homeopathic. Those quiet traces of fascination that are found only when we look for them. It is the sense that we are joined together in one continuous thread of existence with the elements constituting this earth, and that there is potency trapped in this interconnection, a tingle on the border of our perception. It is the forgotten seam in our geology, the elusive particle that binds our unstable matter, the ability to sense magic in the everyday, to channel it through our minds and bodies, to be sustained by it. She says, without it, I feel I am lacking some essential nutrient, some vitamin found only when you go digging in your own soil. I am mindful of how easy it was for the children to fake laughter, and that we grown-ups struggled with it a little bit more, right? May says, enchantment came so easily to me as a child, but I wrongly thought it was small, parochial, a shameful thing to be put away in the rush towards adulthood. She says, now I wonder how I can find it again. It turns out that it had nothing to do with beauty after all, not in any grand objective sense. I think instead that when I was young, it came from a deep engagement with the world around me, the particular quality of experience that accompanies close attention, the sense of contact that emerges from noticing. She says, I worked hard to suppress all those things. I thought it was what I had to do in order to grow up. It took years of work, years of careful forgetting. I never realized what I was losing, but enchantment cannot be destroyed. She says, it waits patiently for us to remember that we need it. And now when I start to look for it, there it is, pale, intermittent, waiting patiently for my return. The sudden catch of sunlight behind stained glass, the glint of gold in the silt of a stream, the words that whisper through the leaves. Enchantment is not just appreciation for what is beautiful. It's a sense of connection with all that is, a depth, a meaning making, a capturing of what is holy, what is at the root, what is at the center. It's attention, noticing, a slowing down that isn't boredom or inertia, but careful and thoughtful experience of what is real. And May spends the book helping us remember where enchantment lies. in the pebbles along the beach, in the waves of the water, in the sky, in the grass, in memories and in each other. We've acknowledged to one another some of the hard things we still carry. So now I'm going to ask you to turn to each other and acknowledge where you are finding enchantment, where you're finding joy, where you are reconnecting and learning again what it is to be awed by life and by existence. So again, only as you are willing, you're going to turn to your neighbor and talk about where you see good overcoming evil, where you're feeling center, what's bringing you joy, what's smiling, making you smile, what's making your heart feel at home. Go for it. In the poem that Anita read for us, Lee Young Lee writes, "Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days, to hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, then bite into the round jubilance of peach." It's like really easy to just eat a peach, to grab it, bite in, wipe the juice from our faces, and go on about our day. It's an entirely other thing to understand that with each bite, that with each bite, the peach gives us also the labor of human hands, the mysterious work of nature, that it is both sunlight and shade, winter and summer, that it is sugar and nourishment and life. To understand the peach as the whole orchard, it's not easy. That level of living in the moment, living with attention, living with enchantment, it isn't functionally possible for every second of every day. Still, I am convinced that the more we can do it, the more we can connect to and reclaim the joy that is ours simply by virtue of living on this earth. We are one incarnation of the atoms that make up the farthest reaches of the stars and the deepest recesses of the ocean. And the more we can reclaim the joy of living and existing together in and among the wonders of this earth, the more we will find our way toward wholeness, toward healing, toward the world we envision. At the end of her book, May writes, "I think I'm beginning to understand that the quest is the point. Our sense of enchantment is not triggered only by grand things. The sublime is not hiding in distant landscapes. The awe-inspiring, the numinous is all around us all the time. It is transformed by our deliberate attention. It becomes valuable when we value it. It becomes meaningful when we invest it with meaning." She writes, "The magic is of our own conjuring. But seeking is a kind of work. It's committing to a lifetime of engagement, to noticing the world around you, to actively looking for small distillations of beauty, to making time to contemplate and reflect, to finding a way to express your interconnectedness with the rest of humanity, to putting your feet on the ground every now and then and feeling the tingle of life that the earth offers in return. It's all there," she says, "waiting for our attention. Take off your shoes because you are always on holy ground." Holiness is found in the wholeness, the joy and the sorrow. We just have to remember to let the sorrow move through and to hold on to and amplify the joy. We have to let go of the fear and anxiety in whatever way we can and embrace the beautiful, the colorful, the natural, the joyful. That is how we come home to the best in ourselves. Come home to this earth that we share, come home to the future we can still build together. May we commit ourselves to joyful enchantment. May we commit ourselves to laughing until our sides hurt. May we commit ourselves to finding beauty in this world we share. And may we commit ourselves to loving with our whole hearts. So may it be.